Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Perry Lewis and I live with my wife Jackie in North Swindon. We've lived in Swindon now since 2009 and we've been members of Freshbrook Church for just over 2 years. I'm an accountant by profession and since 2011 I've been self-employed. I've always worked hard, but in September the Lord turned my life upside down when I discovered that I was seriously ill and in fact that I had a life-threatening illness. As a result of that, in late October I had to go into hospital to have a major operation and I've been home since then, slowly recovering. But I don't want this vlog to be all about my problems and the difficulties which I face. I know that there are a lot of people in Freshbrook Church who are facing far greater challenges and difficulties than I am. So as a newbie, a relatively newbie to Freshbrook Church, what I'd like to talk about is a bit more about you and about the church family at Freshbrook. Both before my operation and since my operation, I have been overwhelmed by the love and support and prayer support that I've received from the church family at Freshbrook. I've discovered friends I didn't even know I had. And it's been truly a support to me and to Jackie during this stressful and challenging time. To illustrate this, I'd just like to give an example of something that happened during my time in hospital. I had my operation on the Saturday morning and for the first 24 hours was still under the effects of the anaesthetic. But by Sunday evening that had started to wear off. Now you have to imagine how I was. You wake up in a strange room that you don't recognise. I had 2 cannulas in the back of my left hand, one for a drip and the other one for patient administered morphine. I had 2 further tubes in my groin. I had a catheter in my bladder and I had 2 plastic tubes in my nose to provide oxygen. In addition to that, because of COVID-19, no visitors are allowed in hospital. So your family, your friends, your wife can't visit you. I've got to say it was one of the lowest points in my life. In fact, at times like that, it's difficult even to pray. All you can do is simply hang on. A bit like a shipwrecked sailor hanging on to a life raft in the sea. The initiative is with God. So what did God do? Well, there were a number of things he could have done. He could have done nothing. He could have left me to my own devices to get on as best as I could. He could have given me a verse from the Bible. After all, I had 2 Bibles in the cupboard, which was just next to my bed. He could have given me a vision, or maybe even a dream. But he chose to do none of those things. Instead, what he did do was he sent me a person. As we got into that Sunday evening, so the day shift in the hospital finished their shift, and the night shift came on to do their turn. And during the course of that night, I got to speaking to the nurse who was looking after me during that night. And she stayed to talk to me. And as we talked, I discovered a number of things. First of all, I discovered that she was a Christian as well. And secondly, I discovered that she had quite serious health problems of her own. And as we talked on, I slowly started to feel somewhat better, and certainly a whole lot less sorry for myself. She was part of that wider church family of which Freshbrook is a part of the universal church. in which we are all part of the body of Christ. We are his hands, his arms, his legs on earth. I'm reminded of the closing scene in the final episode of the BBC series The Ascent of Man, in which Dr. Jacob Bronowski is at Auschwitz. Many of Dr. Bronowski's family perished at Auschwitz. Now you have to imagine how this scene is. He's dressed very smartly in a suit, collar, tie, highly polished shoes. Despite all that, undaunted, he wades into one of the ponds into which the ashes of the victims were flushed. And bending down, he reaches into the water with his hand and picks up a dripping mass of mud. And then he says this: "I owe it as a human being to the many members of my family who died here, to stand here as a survivor and as a witness. We have to cure ourselves of the itch for absolute knowledge and power. We have to close the distance between the push-button order and the human act. We have to touch people." Now, what Dr. Bronowski meant by that was not literally touching, but that as human beings, we have to support and share with one another in adversity. God is alive, and he's working through his people and through his church.